Hey, so this is Derek Murphy. I'm in Chiang Mai, Thailand. It's kind of a rainy day. You can see the kind of gray clouds behind me. I'm going to make some videos about the publishing industry, the business of writing and selling books, and specifically in this video I want to talk about editing. I've talked about editing for a long time. I was originally an editor when I was doing my master's in literature before I became a book cover designer and got into book marketing. Before I had really written a lot of my own books. Now I write fiction and nonfiction, and that's kind of how I make most of my money. So there's this really interesting thing with editing. How much time does it take? How much does it cost? These kind of considerations. I hear this on both sides of the spectrum. I hear this from authors who are looking for, like, how much should I pay for editing, and also from editors, how much should I expect to charge, or how much can I earn? So I'm going to answer some of those questions. I've timed myself recently. I'm actually editing a novel now. I don't normally edit books, but recently I took on some cases, kind of just to make sure, I've still got it. I also do enjoy editing. I love writing. I love publishing books. So to be an editor, you're really seeing a different part of that publishing process, and I like to be in that position. And there's also some things I dislike about it. So I've done some nonfiction and some fiction recently, and I've timed myself, and I can edit around 3,000 words per hour, which is almost as fast as I write. I don't quite write 3,000 words an hour. I'm more like 1,000 probably. I can write 3,000 words a day if I spread it out over a bit of time. But generally, because with writing, like if you were just sitting down and typing out the words, you could do it. But with writing, you generally have to stop. You can do a sprint of like 500 words, and then you kind of have to finish the scene, figure out what comes next, take a break. And it's easier with writing because you're just making it up. You're just kind of going along and filling it in. Whereas editing can make a huge difference depending on what you're editing and how difficult it is. So two of the projects I'm working on now, one of them has a lot of typos and grammatical mistakes, so I have to spend a lot of time polishing those mistakes. And another one is pretty clean. Technically it's clean, there's not a lot of typos, but I have so many more story questions. So on every page I'm like, what is this? Who is this? What's happening? I don't understand. Because the author hasn't explained what's going on, or there's too much backstory. I'll make another video soon about, how to write a first chapter, but so there are different things you have to handle as an editor that's going to take a different amount of time. So I think 3,000 words per hour, that's an okay average for me personally, but I've been doing this for a really long time. I have like 10 years in the industry. You might be faster or slower. I would be cautious against someone who's much faster though. I heard this recently in Facebook. Someone said, they paid someone for an editor. Sometimes you look for a low-cost editor, you look for someone affordable, and they said they found this guy or woman, I don't remember who it was who was editing, and they got it back to them in like 48 hours. And they were like, great, I got a whole book edited in 48 hours, but then actually they didn't do a very good job. They left a lot of stuff, and that's normal. If you want to edit, for example, if I edit 3,000 words an hour, which is actually, I think, kind of, well, maybe it's not fast. I think it's probably kind of average. You might be 1,000 faster or slower than that, but that's kind of a good ballpark. So that means for a 90,000 word book, which is a long novel, but that's totally reasonable. For a 90,000 word book, that's going to take 30 hours of time. If it was a 60,000 word, maybe a shorter book or nonfiction, 60 hours at 3,000 words would take about 20 hours of time. So if you're paying $10 an hour, which is what I think you should probably be paying for an editor, you can find somewhere cheaper. If you're just looking for proofreading, like just fix the typos, you can try to find someone cheaper because that's kind of a universal, not a universal. There's a lot of people who say they will edit your book. The problem with editing, and I've mentioned this previously, is that you can't see what you don't fix. So from an author's perspective, the nice thing about editing as an editor is that authors are almost always happy because they see the improvement, but they don't see what you miss until they publish, and then they start getting comments about all the typos that they didn't catch. But my point was, even if you're an editor, I know people who probably think they are really good editors because they catch a lot of stuff, and actually they also miss a lot of stuff. I've known editors who, like, they're full-time editors, this is what they do. Maybe they have a lot of confidence, they sell themselves, they think they're really good, but they still miss a lot. And no editor will catch everything. Generally, editors catch about 90%. I think there's actually like a rule, if you look it up, like how much editors are supposed to catch And I think it's even less than 90%, but me personally and the people I work with, I wouldn't recommend anybody who didn't have at least a 90% rate. And that will depend a lot on how many typos there are. So if there are thousands of typos in a book, and the editor catches, 900 typos, there's still going to be 100 typos left. So you may think they're a crappy editor because they left 100 typos in the book, but you have to take into account that they fixed, 900. They fixed so much. So if you had a cleaner manuscript, they would have caught, the few remaining typos. So it's always kind of a balance. No editor is perfect. But if you're starting off hiring someone, 10% is just like the basic level that I would pay. And you can find someone for cheaper, a student, someone who's in training or whatever, if you want to. And like I said, if you're only looking for typos, me personally, I write the book, I send it out to my beta readers, I self-edit a lot, but there's still typos, and then I send it to my ARC readers or beta readers, and they help me figure out, they probably catch 50 to 100 typos out of a 70,000 word book that I miss, because it is difficult to edit your own book. But I'm okay with that because I have built an audience of readers. They help me with finding the typos. I don't think the typos are the most important thing. I personally wouldn't pay a proofreader to fix the typos because I have built a process with my readers where they will find most of the problems. And typos are my problem. I'm not looking for a developmental editor or a story editor. If you're a beginner writer, I have a lot of resources on why I don't necessarily think authors should even be paying for editing. And the main reason is editors won't fix your problem. Even the best editor, even a great copy editor or developmental editor, they can point out all the problems with your book, and they can tell you, what's wrong and how to fix it and what you should be doing. But then you have to go into rounds of revision. And even after all of that work, it may still not be a great book because editors can't write the book for you. They can't fix the core problems. They'll help you to take what you have and make it better, make it presentable, make it clean, but that doesn't necessarily, it's going to be a more successful book. You do want a clean book. You want to make sure it's pretty typo free. You want to make sure it's easy to read, well organized, but it's not always worth the investment to pay an editor if the book's not going to earn. So I would prefer to do some testing, to publish using the guerrilla publishing model, which is kind of to do the research and focus on your target audience first so that you're building a book that they're going to enjoy. If you set all these things up, you can expect to earn a certain amount of money from your book, which makes it easier to invest profitably, to invest in a book that's actually going to earn more than you spend, which most authors don't do, which is why I don't recommend editing necessarily, because a lot of authors spend lots of money on a book that doesn't ever earn, and I don't think that's a good idea. But getting back to kind of the details about how much editing can earn or cost, so I was saying, like, for a basic proofreader, maybe $10 an hour is okay. But for someone who really knows what they're doing, if you are a first-time author, if you're looking for someone to help you with the writing, which you probably should be. If you're a first-time writer, whether nonfiction or fiction, if you haven't done any research or learned story architecture, if you didn't do plotting or outlining before, you probably have a pretty messy manuscript that you need help with. So the problem is you're going to have to find an expert in writing who's good enough to not just fix the problems and the mistakes with your book, but actually challenge you to make it a really good piece of, I don't want to say literature because I don't think it has to be, an art, but it does have to be good enough that readers are satisfied with it. And to find that kind of an editor, you should expect to pay a lot more. So, for example, I think I was saying for a 90K book, if it's 30 hours of work, if you paid $10 per hour, it would be $300. So you can find editors for $300. I would maybe pay that much for proofreading. I think that might be a reasonable expectation if they're a really sharp proofreader, because people can be very good at proofreading and actually not be, great at writing fiction or writing nonfiction. And almost nobody is really good at writing fiction or nonfiction, because the amount of authors who successfully publish books that readers enjoy, it's probably less than 1% of all the people who are writing books. And all the editors and publishers who are working with these authors, they also don't really know what kind of books sell. They might be good at cleaning it up and making it, good enough, but if they were really experts at what they were doing, they'd be writing their own books or doing kind of other kinds of business. I just think it's, even in the industry, even among service providers, I think being able to write a really high quality book is unfortunately not a very widespread skill. It seems like it should be in the publishing industry, in the writing industry. It seems like a lot of people should be good at writing good books. It's not actually the case. There's a lot of people publishing pretty bad books, even if they pay for an editor, even if they get a publishing contract or deal, because, like I said, the editor, the publisher, they probably won't fix the stuff for you. So this is self-publishing. It's different if you go traditional publishing to an extent, although I know a lot of authors who have paid for rounds and rounds of developmental editing just to try to get their story good enough to submit to an agent. At this point, it used to be the case that an agent or a publisher would take your book and edit it to turn it into a product. Now they won't really spend the time unless you already have a big platform, unless the book is already really clean. So you may have to invest a lot in a really good editor to help you take your story and turn it into a really good product before you even get a publishing deal, or before you even decide to finally self-publish it. So I would expect to pay a lot more. Personally, when I started editing, which was like 10 years ago when I had my master's in literature, I was charging 2 cents a word for basically proofreading and copy editing. So for an example, at 2 cents a word for a 90,000 word book, that would be, I want to say, $1,800. I think I'm right, but I might be wrong. I think that's probably right. So $1,800 just at 2 cents a word, which is kind of reasonable. That's actually on the low end of the scale that I would pay. Hold on a second, there's a plane. There's a lot of planes where I am in Chiang Mai. We're near the airport, so that's unfortunate when I try to record outside. It's pretty noisy, but it's gonna pass in just a minute, so bear with me. I'm actually going to move this a little down so I'm a little more comfortable. Okay, so $1,800 is kind of what you might expect to pay. A couple $1,000s is not unheard of for a little more than proofreading. I usually do like a one-pass editing that includes proofreading and copy editing, where I will revise and rewrite. Copy editing is more you're changing the words on the page, not just fixing things. And line editing is a little bit more detailed, kind of line by line, rearrangement, moving around. I do a really heavy edit with really lots and lots of comments on everything I do. It's almost exasperating. I was with a friend recently, and she just wanted me to edit her back cover copy. She just wanted me to look it over. A lot of people had given her feedback and been like, why don't you tweak this or this or this? So she was looking over my shoulder as I spent like 20 minutes basically rewriting the whole thing, because to improve something, like if I'm working on something, I don't want to just fix it so it's not terrible. I want to actually make it good, which usually requires complete revision or rewriting. It's always going to depend on the editor. Editors are going to have their own different styles. But for a 90K novel, a 90,000 word novel, which is on the long end, at 2 cents a word, 1,800 for like basic proofreading and editing, I think that's average. You can find much cheaper. I know a lot of editors who charge 1 cent or half a cent per word. You can definitely find them. I tend to think they're more amateurs, but that doesn't mean they're not skilled. It just means a professional is basically someone who does this as their main job. They built a business around it. They built a website around it. Excuse me. If you're getting the traffic, if you're good at sales, if you present yourself well, you can charge more. So if that's like your main thing, if you have tons of testimonials, you can charge more. If you're just, selling yourself on Facebook, which a lot of editors do, they just get on Facebook groups and they say, I'm an editor, but they don't really have a business, or they're not business minded. They have the skill, but they haven't built a business. That's kind of what I would call amateurs. So they might be good at what they do, but they may not be very experienced, or they may not be confident enough to charge higher prices, or maybe they're happy with the price that they get paid. So I said earlier, a 90,000 word novel, if it was 1 cent a word, it'd be like $900. If it was half a cent, which is what some people charge, it would be $450. So some people are happy to take $450 to edit a 90,000 word book. That's more than $10 an hour, which I said earlier was kind of my like base level pay that I think you should expect to pay someone who's decent enough or good enough at their job. So you can pay $450, which is half a cent a word, and get, for editing, for proofreading, it might be good enough if they're just cleaning it up and fixing it. If you're expecting someone to take your story and make it really good, someone who's better at you at writing, someone who's better at you at publishing and knows how to tell stories that satisfy readers, if you want to take your writing to the next level and hire an expert who can give you feedback on the craft so that your book is not just good enough but truly remarkable, you're going to have to pay more. So like I said, I think 2 cents a word is a good starter for high quality work. I wouldn't necessarily pay 2 cents a word because probably, like I said, even if they're really great, they can't fix your story. Even though you might learn a lot from them, you may not earn the money back on this particular book. I would actually invest in studying craft or studying story architecture or studying writing, because what a lot of people do is they finish their first draft and they just want to pay someone thousands of dollars to fix it or tell them what's wrong with it, and that's where they're going to do their learning. And that's really, that's very valuable, but there's other ways to do that without spending the money. And so, like, personally for me, I wouldn't probably edit for 2 cents a word anymore. I'd probably charge at least 4 cents a word or 6 cents a word, because I would want to do a manuscript review first, where I tell them everything that's wrong with the story and I fix it, or I tell them how to fix it. I give them, like, I've done this thing now with my new course, which is the Bestseller Blueprint, where people will send me their outlines and I'll help them fix their outline. I'll help them plot their story before they write it, because that saves so much time, and then I can actually help them craft the right kind of story. It's going to save us both a lot of time later when they finish it. That's what I would actually suggest doing, something like that. If I was really working with someone one-on-one, I probably would charge 4 cents or 6 cents a word, but I would probably feel bad, because even at that extent, even if I was completely changing everything or revising everything, even if they had a pretty good story, it still wouldn't be as good as if, I was able to go back with them at the beginning and help them write it or help them craft it, or do more like daily feedback, or like every time they write a scene, I give them feedback on a scene. That's kind of the stuff. If I do editing in the future, I may make some kind of course where there's more of that kind of a process, where it's more one-on-one feedback, going through the process. If someone sends me a manuscript after they've finished it, I just find that's frustrating for both of us, because I can only take it so far. So it's hugely valuable in terms of learning how to write better, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the book I work on is going to be profitable, because there's only so much I can do as an editor. Anyway, so I hope that kind of makes sense. If you're an editor, like if I was editing now, I would charge 4 cents a word at least for a 90K novel. It would be 3,600 words, and even that, I'm not sure if I would feel comfortable spending that much time, because that's 30 hours of my time or more. I don't like to spend time with other people unless I'm earning them money. So I wouldn't like to take $3,600, or even if I charge 6 cents a word, and it would be, I don't know, more than that. I wouldn't want to take that much money if I'm not confident that they can earn the money back with their book. So I would probably have to set up some kind of an application process where they submit projects to me, and I would take on the ones that I think have commercial viability, that I know I could help to get good enough that it could sell more than they spend with me. That's what it would take for me to feel confident working with those projects, which is mostly why I don't really do editing anymore. It's not that I'm not worth it, it's just that I don't feel, there's other things that I would rather do with my time that I can earn more money with. If I spend 30 hours on something, building something, making something, I could make more money on my own, or I could build resources that would help more than just one person. So that's kind of a consideration if you're thinking about editing. I remember, years ago, one of my competitors was charging 6 cents a word, and I thought I do this is 6 cents. In Taiwan, we use hands gestures for every number anyway, so I picked that up there. But I used to think, I was charging 2 cents a word, which I thought was reasonable, and I was flabbergasted that he was, had the confidence to charge 6 cents a word, which I thought was ridiculous. But now that I have so much more experience and knowledge of the industry, especially now that I've been publishing successful fiction and nonfiction books, and I really know what it takes to sell or to write those kind of books, I'm excited about that, and I'm really good at that. So if I did editing, I would charge more, but that's something you kind of have to be comfortable with and familiar with. You have to know what kind of value you're providing and you're able to provide, and how much churn you want to do. If you're a faster editor, maybe you can do more than 3,000 words an hour, which I wouldn't necessarily recommend, because I do think you should go slowly and take your time. If you're an editor, I don't think there's an excuse for doing a crappy job as an editor or skimming over things too quickly. So anyway, this video was kind of like, how much can you earn editing, how much does editing cost, and also how long does editing take specifically, whether you're editing for someone else. I've also been in this position where I'm like, to my course recently, I said, send me your first chapter, it's no big deal, I like editing, I'm good at this, but people's first chapters were 3,000 and I have 100 students in my course, so that's, setting myself to edit 300,000 words, which is going to take me a while, which is fine because, I really want to provide value for my guerrilla publishing students, but I also sometimes underestimate, I feel like this is easy for me, I enjoy it, I'm good at it, why not just do it for free for some people? And I've done this also. I've been, a few times people have gotten screwed over, they've had editors disappear, they've had editors just vanish, which is kind of the thing you need to watch out for if you're just hiring some random editor on Facebook or whatever, even if they've been recommended. I run the Book Butchers, which is kind of just a loose organization of editors, and I look out for really high quality editors, and it's hard to find them because even if they have a great CV, if they've a great resume, they've worked with tons of best-selling authors, sometimes they're still not very good, even if they have degrees in literature. Or what also happens is they have great reviews and testimonials. They have rave reviews from other authors, but they're actually not that good. And like I said earlier, sometimes it's difficult to tell whether an editor is good because authors only see the difference. So and the other thing to watch out for, I'll mention here, is that a lot of authors say it's really important to find an editor they feel comfortable with, an editor that gets them, an editor that they have a banter with. And I don't necessarily think that's the most important thing. Just because you feel comfortable with your editor, your editor is not your friend. You're paying them to improve your book, not to make you feel good. I would rather have a much tougher editor. I still want them to get my writing, and I still want to trust that they know what they're doing. But I don't want it to be, I don't necessarily want to feel good and friendly with my editor. I want them to push me to become a better writer. Anyway, I'll end this video here because it's noisy again with the plane, and this is getting kind of long. But those are some considerations. I'll put the details down below for like the math and the calculations, how much you should expect to pay, how much you should expect to earn, how long does it take you to edit. This is something you'll have to practice at. I would like to say, you can get faster as an editor. Like with writing, I've challenged myself to become a faster writer. I'm not sure if you can become faster as an editor, because you do kind of need to go slowly, and it's going to depend on the project. That's why sometimes, like, you really should let people apply first and see how much work you're going to need to do on the project, because if you set yourself off cheap, if you say 2 cents a word but it takes you 6 times longer than something else because it's just you need to go so heavy with the revision and the editing, you kind of want to take that into account. So I understand why some editors don't like to set a flat fee. On the other hand, if you are an editor, I think you will be more successful if you do set a flat fee, because authors, they don't want to like apply and for an editor to get back to them with a price. They just want to see the price and take that into account immediately, and then also do a trial edit and see if the communication is good, if the trial edit is good, if the price is right. Those are all the things that authors are looking for when they choose an editor. And then also having lots of testimonials and reviews. I haven't really built anything of like the business. If you want to become a professional editor, these are the things that you should do. I might talk a little bit about that stuff in another video I'm going to make next about ghostwriting, which is a similar but totally different thing I'm actually really excited about right now. So look for that video as well. Bye-bye.